Well, hello. Security forces in France remain on high alert after legislation to raise the state pension age caused massive protests. The dispute and outbreaks of violence forced the authorities to postpone a planned state visit by the British monarch King Charles. Meanwhile, separate demonstrations have begun in western France linked to concerns over water usage by large-scale agricultural producers. It's feared the disputes could converge at a time of growing tensions. Well, let's just take a look at some pictures now. These are protests in Saint-Céline in western France, where people are protesting against the deployment of a new water storage infrastructure for agricultural irrigation. That's despite an official ban on that gathering there. And you can see protests are still going ahead. Well, Bethany Bell is in Paris for us this afternoon. And Bethany, a number of different protests going on at the moment. Just talk us through what's happening.
Well, the most dramatic one at the moment is this one we're seeing pictures of in western France. This was a demonstration that's been planned for a while. It was always expected to attract radical protesters, and we've seen at least 2 police vehicles in flames. We understand police have used tear gas, also that protesters have thrown fireworks at police, and there's also been use of water cannon there. And this, of course, is a separate protest from the very big protests we've seen against President Macron's pension reforms. But of course, it adds to this general atmosphere of anger, of uncertainty here in France, and a sense that many protesters are angry, and that there may develop a sort of situation where you see generalized anger fueling those pension reform protests.
And we are still looking at those pictures, Bethany, in western France. But where you are in Paris, are we expecting any further protests there? And if so, is anyone that is heading to the capital, the tourists, being given any information at the moment?
Well, I think you can see behind me there is a very heavy security presence here in the capital. Overnight and this morning, Paris has been quiet. We haven't seen the sort of wide-scale protests that we saw on Thursday, but another day of national action has been planned for Tuesday, the 10th day of national action. And one of the reasons that the visit of King Charles was postponed is that the French government didn't want his visit to take place on that 10th National Day of Action. And also, what's emerged here is the sense many of the protesters are angry with President Macron because they perceive him, they say, as somebody who's behaving above his powers. Some of the protests, in fact, carried signs suggesting he was acting in a king-like manner, and the danger the government felt was that if there were pictures of Mr. Macron having dinner with King Charles in the former royal palace of Versailles, that wouldn't do his image any good. So there is really the sense of a crisis here. At the moment, people aren't sure quite how this is going to be resolved. And the government, of course, saying that the pension reform was necessary. It was necessary for France's economy. But many French people here, even if they are on board with the idea of a pension reform, say they're concerned. They say that President Macron is not acting in a way that is compatible with democracy as they see it here.
And just, Bethany, while you are speaking, we are actually seeing live pictures now from Saint-Céline of a bus that has, we understand, has been lit on fire there. Lots of police gathering around. It looks like things seem to be getting out of hand there. And as you've mentioned, clearly a lot of anger, and we're just watching those live pictures now. It's not just a bus, but there are a number of cars on fire too.
Yes, and some of those cars we know are police vehicles. As I said, though, this was a protest that was always expected to attract radical protesters. The protesters themselves say 30,000 people are there. The authorities say 6,000 people are there, 1,000 of whom are radical and potentially contributing to this violence. But as I said before, again, we understand that fireworks have been thrown at police, tear gas has been used by the police, and water cannon in an attempt to bring these protests under control. But yes, really a sense of anger there in Western France.
And Bethany, just while we keep looking at those pictures, some quite dramatic pictures there, as you say, there's differing numbers expected there. Police are saying one thing, protesters are saying something else. Is there any sign right now, as we see these dramatic pictures, of any kind of resolution on these matters? Because there are so many different matters and so many different protests going on in the country over different things.
It's a complicated situation at the moment, and what we're hearing from various people from all sides are saying that they don't quite see a way out at the moment. You have President Macron, who is saying he's sticking to his line. There are members of his own party who are worried that that might not be the correct way forward, and some people saying he's looking increasingly isolated. There are other people saying that they would like to negotiate. We've heard from the union saying that they see President Macron as somebody who's really very top-down and somebody, a president just for the wealthy here. And then you have President Macron's own argument, which is that France's economy needs to see this pension reformed. It is the right thing, he said, for pension age to be raised to 64 instead of 62 years old. So many different arguments here. And as I say, this big day of protest planned for Tuesday, we'll see how things pan out over the next few days.
OK, well, thank you very much, Bethany Bell, there in Paris, as we've been seeing protests continuing across the country.